Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, we have our usual roundup of stories affecting the Sikh community around the world, and in the United States, we report on the fight back by the Sikh community in California against a government clampdown on the trucking industry in the form of a huge class action lawsuit. And in the UK, yet another hate crime sees a viral video of someone leaving a pile of raw meat outside a Gurdwara. But is all as it seems? Well, all that and more on today's show, but joining me as always, and sadly for the last time, at least for the moment, is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our viewers out there. And again, yes, it is sad that it is my final show after a year and a half of doing this with Angus and, of course, with our amazing audience out there. But again, I may pop up in Angus's different podcasts and such as a guest, so you never know where you find me. And of course, I will continue with my wholehearted support of the Khalistan referendum, of the Khalistan movement. And yeah, you'll see videos online in different places where I cover certain events. So don't be worried. I am looking forward to new chapters. And tonight, I'm going to just talk a bit about the different shows that we've done, the different, stories we've covered, and a bit of a message of hope for the future. So stick around.
Indeed, quite a very sad day, an end of an era, but hopefully James will be back in not too long to join us on Perspectives. But in the meantime, for today at least, we'll cover a bit of a retrospective and, of course, a few stories affecting the Sikh community around the world. And indeed, at the end of the show, we'll take a look at some of your comments, which are filled up below the videos. Thank you for those, as always. But James, let's get underway then. What are you going to talk to us today about?
Well, as I said, it is the end of an era, as you said, and the final show. So I thought I would just kind of go over some of the things that we have covered together, some of the important issues that, of course, have been prominent on the program. And we can start with the 5Ks. I mean, there's been so much that I've learned about the Sikh culture, about religion, about the people. And not only that, but I've got to travel a bit to meet people, whether that was at the referendum in Edmonton, in Calgary, stopping for a night visit out in Revelstoke, where we came live to you talking about the history, the very rich history of the Sikhs in that region when it came to the logging industry, as well as visiting certain museums and other events surrounding the BC Sikh Heritage Month. So again, it has been a road well traveled when it comes to the stories that we've covered. We've talked about racism, and of course with that, we've tried to educate not just our Sikh friends on this channel, but we've reached out to trying to educate the Caucasians, the Blacks, the Asians, everybody, to try and encourage people to learn about other religions. Not just about Sikhi, but about whether it's Hinduism, whether it's about Sikhism, whether it's about Buddhism, whether it's about Christianity. We encourage people to actually learn about religions that they're not aware of. The root cause of a lot of racism and a lot of racially motivated violence is the certain fact that people don't understand. They don't have a clear understanding of what the religion stands for. They don't have an understanding of how rich the culture is. They don't have an understanding that Sikhs have stood shoulder to shoulder with our troops, whether it's World War I, whether it's World War II, whether it is so many other different events that have happened throughout history. They don't understand that there was a Chinese head tax in Canada and the way that the Chinese were handled in those early years of Canadian history, but also the racism that is still happening when we talk about people like Jagmeet Singh and others who are politically targeted or targeted by the transnational repression and other events that we see happening even to this day. With a better understanding of different cultures, of different histories, it becomes a clearer picture for people that they don't need to fear what they don't know and don't understand. Instead, they get that understanding and therefore breaks down the barriers that stand between friendship, camaraderie, and, of course, acceptance and encouragement. We know that Sikhi stands for encouraging others to be the best of themselves. as they lead by example in being the best of themselves. And to that, it has been an amazing road of learning, but also a lot of introspect, where Angus and I have learned a lot about ourselves in embracing what the lessons are that we've learned as well. We've looked at immigration issues over the last year and a half, and we've watched how the open floodgates of immigration do not work, but that there is a knee jerk reaction by many, including the story that we covered yesterday from New Zealand. People are blaming the immigrants for the challenges that we are facing as a society, whether that's increased grocery costs, whether that is a lack of proper infrastructure planning, whether or not that stands for a lot of overcrowding in hospitals or schools, and of course, when it comes to the housing crisis. The problem is not the immigrants, it is how the immigration system tried to find a balance, but instead just open floodgates to try and fill the need for workers, whether that's people cleaning our hospitals, whether that's doctors, nurses, engineers, software developers, and right through to carpenters and others that work at all levels of industry in Canada and in Western nations. People see them as taking their jobs, but seriously, when you look at this, a lot of the immigrants that come into the nation, whether it's from India, whether it's from specifically the Punjab, or other nations such as Mexico, they are filling jobs that they cannot fill otherwise. And when I say they, I'm referring to the employers. There is a worker shortage when it comes to certain areas, and in the Western world, we've become a bit spoiled. We are not spending 12 hours a day in a smoking hot field picking fruits and vegetables. That is not a job that's easy to fill. And yet, people who are coming into the nation are there because they want to build a better life. And they are going to do it at any cost that's required. And that includes cleaning toilets in hospitals. That includes picking the berries and the other fruits and vegetables when the temperatures are just insanely off the thermostats. We know that people that come to this country are here, and when I say this country, I'm also referring to the US, to the UK. People are looking for a better life. Do some get in that are there for nefarious purposes? Well, yes, that does happen. And that's where controlled immigration needs to come into play. That is a point where they need to say, okay, we're going to allow this many to come in and we need people to fill these jobs and such. But at the same time, we have to look at it as a society and say, do we have enough housing for these individuals? Do we have enough classroom spaces for the students that are coming in from other nations as foreign students? A lot of the schools have exploited that system, and what they have done in turn is take pretty much anybody from anywhere as long as they are paying. And they are not providing the proper level of service, whether that's education or training, that these people deserve. And again, this causes strain on the system when they arrive, and the schools are not prepared to house them, to give them the student supports, and to help them to adjust to society. Something else that we've learned about Sikh is how the sharing, whether that's through Seva, whether that's through, sharing of meals and food banks and community support, and their spirit of community service. I want to encourage any of the viewers out there that when you see someone that is new to the country or new even to your community, that you welcome them in, that you don't fear them, whether they are Muslim, whether they are Sikh, whether they are Hindu, whether they are anything else. But remember that a big part of the assimilation into Canadian society is being welcomed in and learning about it. People can adjust much easier when they have a support circle around them, when they've learned, when they have been able to interact. Now, their English may not be as good as ours, but again, we have people in parts of Alberta or Arkansas or other that we shake our head and ask, what the heck are they talking about? So again, it's about patience, understanding, and acceptance. Invite people in for a meal at your home. You have somebody new at work who isn't familiar with the area or the country. Invite them in for a meal, because friendship and acceptance speaks much louder than any language, and that helps to break down the barriers. It also helps people to get more comfortable. How does this benefit? Well, of course, they're going to be excellent co-workers, but at the same time, they are going to feel welcomed in a nation where everything is new and strange and different. And that makes a happier community, a safer community, but also helps us to learn about others. Now, as you can see on this screen here, I just have some random videos just playing in the background as a placeholder, but it also is representative of different stories that we've covered. We see the wildlife images mixed in there because we've covered the environmental and hazards to our planet. We have spoken over the last year and a half about the horrific, toxic environmental catastrophe that are the rivers in India that are still seeing to this day industrial pollutants. We are seeing the runoff from textile plants. We are seeing raw sewage pumped out into the rivers that are used for religious and other important services or events. And this is a time for people to come together and understand that as a community, we are much bigger than that. We are a part of a global community, and that involves every country. We are all one big family, and families fight, as you see, between nations and wars that are going on right now. But that does not excuse the indifference when it comes to releasing toxins into the water streams where people have to use that to drink. 80% of the people in New Delhi are getting their water that has to be filtered and treated, but at the same time, it's coming from an abundance of rivers in the nation that are polluted. Therefore, it has and will continue to cause increased cancer rates and illnesses and potential birth defects in the future generations if more is not done to get a grip on this problem. We've seen where the air toxicity levels or the air quality index has been off the charts in Delhi and other parts of India for decades, and yet it is still something that is moving very slowly. We saw where certain international organizations had committed certain funds and a lot of it to help India with that problem when India is wasting money on space programs and other issues that need not be as pressing as their own population's health and safety. And that again is something that we've looked at over this last year or year and a half. I encourage all of our viewers out there to not only continue watching as Angus brings you his shows and other individuals on the Savage Network, but I also encourage you to get involved. Speak out about the injustices. Speak out about the environment. Speak out about Khalistan. We know that Khalistan is going to be a leader in this world that we call Earth and that we call a community. We know that Khalistan will have its challenges as it launches and as it's recognized as a sovereign nation, but at the same time, it's going to be a leader for peace, for acceptance, for so many things that we don't have in that region now, and that's going to be an important part. We've taken a look at issues and events, whether that's Vaisakhi or other events that have happened throughout Western Canada, and we've enjoyed the celebration. We've been there, we've recorded it, but most of all, we've immersed ourselves in the culture, and that is exciting. I encourage people to still get out and go to the Gurdwaras, go to the Vaisakhi parades, get out and really learn about the Sikh people, and you will be amazed at how much you learn, but also how much more you build that friendship and see how the hearts are really wide open to anybody. When it comes to other issues, of course, we have spoken in depth about the crime wave in Canada when it comes to the Lawrence Bishnoy gang and other crime opportunities that have been afforded to international cartels and international crime gangs. We've looked at the death of Hardeep Singh Nijjar and the attempted assassinations of others, and of course, that will continue. As a resident of the Surrey community, I will still continue to monitor and champion for those individuals who are accused of killing Hardeep Singh Nijjar to ensure that they face the full power of the justice system here in Canada. But that is not enough. We all need to come together and make sure that the Government of Canada, the RCMP, CSIS, and the new targeted teams and special groups that have been formed to deal with this extortion problem that's facing Canada, whether that's at Caps Cafe or elsewhere across our country. We need to make sure that it is stopped. To label the Bishnoi gang a terrorist group is not good enough. We need to make sure that steps are taken to not only incarcerate those who perpetrate violent crimes against our communities, but also to ensure that further steps are taken by the Canadian Border Services Agency to stop them from entering the country in the first place if they do have ties to the Bishnoi gang or other international groups that are, of course, known for their criminality. We need to make sure that we support families such as the Najjar family after crisis happens. But again, it's up to us to make sure that we step up to try and prevent these horrific attacks from taking place. We've also spoken about the major events when it comes to mass attacks on the public, whether that is attacks on protesters, whether it's attacks on community events such as the Lapu Lapu Festival in Vancouver. We know that there have been a lot of changes when it comes to here in Canada and Western nations on how groups are able to celebrate. We know that there are safety issues that are increasing around the world, and we saw that when it came to the certain parade in Australia this past year. We know that there are concerns, but together we can get past them and we can address them and make sure that these individuals who are perpetrating these horrific events are clearly understanding that it's not going to be tolerated and they're not going to get away with it. But at the end of the day, that they're not going to break our spirit, they're not going to break the community, that it only builds stronger ties and that people come together in times of crisis. We've also spoken about, as I said, the different human rights issues, whether that's J&K, whether that's in Punjab, but at the heart of it as well, we've talked about the way in which the BJP, the RSS, and other individuals and groups within India are using the drug crisis and the drug pandemic, that I call it, around the world to not only create a crime wave and a crime issue in Punjab to offer more or to instill more instability, but also the population stacking, where they want to bring in more of a population into Punjab to overwhelm the systems, the infrastructure, but most importantly, the vote. And that's what it's all about, folks. Getting out, having your voice heard. And again, there are still several votes coming up with the Khalistan referendum. So get out and have your voice heard so that you can at least be a part of creating a sovereign Khalistan that can stand on its own, that can be recognized by international parties, and that can flourish in the future, because Angus and I are looking forward to sitting in a cafe bringing you a report when that day happens, regardless as to whether we're together doing perspectives on Satnage TV or elsewhere. We want to be there when that day happens. On that note, though, just a reminder, folks, that you can still support the Satnage Network, and you can find the link tree in the description of this video. You can find different ways to support the channel, whether that is through financial contributions, or you can also be sure to share this video, to like the videos, to comment on the videos, because all of these things help to spread the word. All of these things help to build a stronger awareness inside and outside of the Sikh community. These different programs are essential to ensure that the Hindutva media does not override the message of truth and, of course, honesty. We've seen the Hindutva media we've seen how their bots and their systems overload with fake news stories, with disinformation, with misinformation, and we've gone through in depth the different, media literacy when it comes to understanding those different terminologies in the media coverage. But again, we can't let the RSS, RAW, and the BJP call the narrative and dictate what the world thinks when it comes to the reality that India continues to breach human rights. They continue to mistreat not only Sikhs, but Christians and Muslims and others within the confines of the borders of India. And until Khalistan is there, we will continue to raise awareness and fight for that right for the sovereign nation and the people to make their own choice for a better destiny and a better future together. With that said, of course, thank you everyone, including the Satledge team, for this last year and a half. It's been an honor and a privilege to be on the network, to come to people in their homes. And with that, of course, it is muchly appreciated. And thank you to our viewers for supporting the program for the last year and a half. I will be out in the community. I will be involved in other projects. So by all means, I will look forward to keeping you in the loop on my other social media channels. But until then, khalistan zindabad, and thanks for watching. Angus, back to you.
Yes, indeed, James. Well, it really is the end of an era. It's actually very sad. Of course, after a year and a half, the Canadian perspective has always been such a crucial part of what we do talk about, and it will be obviously there will be a huge gap in the program going forward without your dulcet tones, as they say. But it was a very interesting retrospective, and he did, of course, cover most of all of the main issues that we do talk about with sad regularity in the case of many of the issues. And the Canadian diaspora is one of the largest diasporas in the world. It carries a huge amount of weight, and of course, many of the issues that are experienced with the Canadian diaspora are, of course, reflected across all the other major diasporas and some of the minor diasporas as well. We talked about transnational repression. Of course, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, one of the most high-profile incidents really in the last couple of years. And it was Canada that took the vanguard in terms of standing up to India and Narendra Modi, calling them out for the belief that they were behind such a murder. And of course, again, that reflects the transnational repression that's happened in the United States, it's happened here in the UK, and of course across other countries as well, across the diaspora. But yes, I think that retrospective was interesting because, of course, we have all the negative sort of side of many things that we have to talk about. The hate crimes, the rise in hate crimes, which again are reflected right across the diaspora, not just in Canada. There is the whole transnational repression issues. But of course, then there's a positive side, this whole educational aspect. And as we often say, it's me and you, James, two sort of middle-aged white men learning all about Sikhi. We came into this knowing very little, apart from what is out there just in the general public domain. And we come across on a sort of more natural basis. But suddenly, now getting more involved with the community, it's been a huge learning journey for both of us. And I have to say, it's been a very positive learning journey. There's so much that we have learned that has been so positive, and it has actually been an honour and a pleasure to actually talk to a wide audience, and hopefully a growing audience, about and educating, not just obviously myself and James, but it's educating people outside the community about what the community has to offer to the world. And there are the very visible aspects of that: the Savour, the selfless service, the Langar, things like that, the charitable efforts, huge charitable efforts that wherever there is a natural disaster, of course, you find Sikhs right at the front line, at the sharp end, always dishing out help, assistance, resources, food, whatever, to those who've been affected by these tragedies. They are very much the public, visible aspect of the Sikh community. And it's been an absolute delight for us to sort of hopefully bring this to a wider audience as well, and remind, or not even remind, is actually educate for the first time many people out there who might not realise just how much the Sikh community contribute to the global family, the global community, as you referred to there, James. So yes, I think it's been quite a journey, and it'll be a very sad day really to see you go, I have to say. But ultimately, the show is called Perspectives. It has been great to have your perspective, James. And going forward, it will be a lonely voice from my side. But ultimately, hopefully, all being well, we will have James back periodically, whether it's in a podcast or just providing just a little bit of news from his corner of Canada, which is always very, very well received, James.
And it's been a blast. And let's just remember, folks, is that as you as a viewer sit at home and you watch this video, that shows the power of one little video that if you put out, you never know where it's going to go. When I was covering the war in Ukraine and the refugee crisis in Poland, of course, I took some time to speak with the Sikh groups that were there, as well as helping them to unload trucks of food and that. But it shows the widespread love that they have for humanity, and that, again, as you said, Angus, no matter where they are in the world, they are bringing hope, they are bringing they're filling a need. And I met Sikhs from the UK, from Seattle, from all over the world there, and that was just such an honor. But the reason I bring that up is because after that, I really wanted to understand what this Khalistan movement was about. So I learned about it, what was the principles, what was the foundation, and I created a couple little videos on YouTube and on TikTok to really give a perspective as to what the Khalistan movement was about for the rest of the Western world that didn't understand it either. As I learned, I shared those videos. These videos were seen hundreds of thousands of times. But at the end of the day, that's how Savage found my video, and here it turned into a year and a half and of doing shows to educate people further. So again, you never know when that one little video that you put out as a viewer can turn into something much bigger and hopefully educate and make a difference. And that's amazing, Angus. I know that you'll make a difference going forward as you continue to educate people and bring the podcast and so much more. So I have faith in you. Keep it going.
Indeed, yeah. And I think you raised another really important point there, which is very, very much relevant and pertinent to our audience. Is get involved, and it's a message that we often say is get involved. It's all very well me and James just talking about Khalistan and promoting the whole concept as such a positive thing to fight for. Metaphorically and democratically speaking. It's also, it can only happen with the people out there, the audience, getting out there, spreading the word, getting involved, getting out there with those lovely Khalistan flags, the colourful yellow flags, get out there in every opportunity. Because even small events are often televised, or they can have unexpectedly large audiences. So you never quite know just what an impact these sorts of things can have. And just every now and again, they can go viral, they can reach a huge audience, and suddenly that message is out there in a much wider perspective. And the whole concept of Khalistan, as we often say, or we say on a daily basis, it is such a positive thing to bring to the world. It is such a great issue to fight for. We all need a banner to stand beneath and fight for, to motivate our lives, to give us a point to our lives in many ways. And Khalistan, to me, certainly, and to you, James, clearly, is something really worth standing up and fighting and really doing every effort we can to make it happen, to get it over the line. We are confident that it is coming. There is a lot going on behind the scenes. We do feel this sort of great, positive, huge momentum building globally, not just obviously in the Punjab, but globally, because it is, of course, globally that we need that support and the global leaders to fall into alignment to make it happen. But it is happening. There is a lot going on. So as I say, it's really positive. It's been great that James and I together, we can join our small voices to the clamour, the huge clamour that's growing around the world to push forward to Khalistan. So yeah, certainly on that, James, I think hopefully we've done our little bit together, and certainly going forward I will continue, but hopefully James will not be a stranger to the whole Khalistan concept.
There you go.
Indeed. Okay.
Well, we better move on to your stories there, Angus, or we're going to run out of time for the final show.
Absolutely. Well, why break the habit of a lifetime? But anyway, let's move on.
So true.
And I've got a couple of fairly short stories just to sort of wrap up today, and indeed wrap up the year, actually, as it happens, being it New Year's Eve. I'm going to start actually, sadly, with again, it's a familiar story. It's a hate crime that happened actually just before Christmas. Let me play this video. I'll keep this video playing in the background. This is a video of a man filmed outside of Gurdwara in West Bromwich. That's in the Midlands here in the UK. Of course, it's an area of a large diaspora community here in the UK. And it happened on the 22nd of December. It was in the afternoon, about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, just outside the Guru Nanak Gurdwara in West Bromwich. And this guy, a white man, was caught on the local CCTV carrying this bag, walking past the Gurdwara, and then intentionally, clearly, dumping its contents in front of the entrance gates. And it turns out, as obviously people who walked out to find out what it was raw meat. And so this actually, and it is a significant incident. It's not just a simple case of littering. It was clearly a deliberate hate crime. It has been reported to the police as a hate crime. And it has been described as, and has been recorded officially as, racially and religiously aggravated intentional harassment. Now, the reason that it is and again, to educate people why this might seem a bit of a strange thing to do and seen as a hate crime, the meat, and usually this is something that right-wing extremists aim towards the Islamic community, usually with pork. Of course, pork is offensive to Muslims. And I suspect that this hate crime it's mistaken identity, ironically. And I think that the local Gurdwara committee don't think it is. I think this is. There are recorded incidents of white racists dumping pork outside mosques. It is quite possible that this guy who's done this can't differentiate between a mosque and a Gurdwara. Unfortunately, sadly, as we see all too often across the Western world, is that when right-wing racists attack ethnic minorities, they can't differentiate between a Muslim or a Sikh. Sadly, as we saw post 9/11, where the first victim, sadly, of a hate crime was a Sikh who was believed to have been a Muslim. So again, this is obviously a small-scale incident based on that same issue, where I suspect this idiot saw the local Gurdwara and thought, oh, it's one of them, thinking they were Muslims, and has dumped this pile of pork outside. Now, the Sikh Press Agency, the Sikh Press Association, have actually made a statement. Their senior press officer, Jas Singh, has made a statement to say Sikhs have been immersed in the local community in West Bromwich for decades. They're part of the local football club, the local businesses, community saver, and more all through the area. So in other words, basically what it's saying is that our local diaspora community in West Bromwich are so integrated and have contributed so much to the local community that it's very unlikely, as you said, it's very unlikely anyone local wouldn't have known that the Gurdwara was the local Sikh place of worship. So what he's basically saying is, look, everybody in West Brom knows how positive the local Sikh community is and how big it is, obviously, how large it is in terms of numbers of people. They recognise the Gurdwara being the central place of Sikh worship. It's nothing to do with the Muslims. It's not a mosque. So he's saying it's unlikely this was mistaken identity. Again, I have to say, I do slightly disagree. I think this guy's an idiot, and I don't think he does realise. Maybe he's come from out of the area, of course, that's another option. Anyway, but Jas continues to say, as such, especially after incidents in Wolverhampton, Walsall, Albury and Nuneaton in recent months, of course, this isn't an isolated incident, and even just last week in Coventry, there is ongoing tension in the UK Sikh communities regarding feeling directly targeted by bigotry. Grassroots efforts to safeguard continue, as do efforts to ensure appropriate police action is taken. So there you go, James. It's very sad to see this, but again, I think it does sort of highlight lots of issues. Firstly, it highlights this simmering anger that we have here in the UK, and unfortunately it's not just in the UK, I know it is the same in North America, that has been driven by issues like uncontrolled immigration. And the right wing, and particularly the extremist end of the right wing, are now so angry, they're looking for outlets for that anger. And of course, sadly, it is our local communities, like the Sikh community, and of course the Islamic community, and even the Hindu community, our local communities, ethnic minorities, are being targeted by these people in any scattergun approach to try and find an outlet for that anger. So this is a prime example of that, sadly. And all it's doing, it is creating division, it's creating hatred, and it is not solving the issue. The only way these issues are going to be solved is looking at the root causes of this, which I often say is issues like uncontrolled immigration. Until we start tackling the roots of these, we're going to continue to see rising issues like this, rising hate crimes, rising division between our communities, and particularly targeting one of the communities that actually, ironically, has been, I'd say, more British than many British people in terms of what they've contributed to this nation. So there you go, James. As I say, it's very sad to see this.
Absolutely. And let's take a look at a few ironies here, Angus, is that had he been watching our program, he could have learned the difference between a mosque and a Gurdwara. But more importantly, he could have understood that instead of wasting food and throwing it on the ground, that they would have welcomed him in to actually share a meal with them. And I think that is a message that is so important, is that, as you said, what the community gives back is phenomenal and really misunderstood because they don't have that awareness. Again, we'll continue in our ways to raise awareness because ignorance is absolutely no excuse for racism. And events like this have no place in modern civilization, whether that's in the UK, Canada, the US, or elsewhere. And unfortunately, we're seeing more and more of it when realistically, I mean, when we look at history, we've learned so much, and yet it's being erased, and all of that success in trying to unite people from different backgrounds is just being, whitewashed, and that's a shame to see idiots like this out there. And, just any type of racially motivated actions, whether that is defined as criminal or not, any type of actions towards another, whether it be bullying or bigotry or violence at a local isolated level or at a national or a grand level. Either way, there's no place for it in today's modern society, Angus.
Yeah, there's not, and one of the, I suppose, the sad, deep ironies of all this is that even right-wing political figures. I mean, for example, Tommy Robinson, who's a very divisive figure here in the UK, but he does certainly stand on the right wing, and even he, on the right wing, has actually said publicly, we need to support the Sikh community, or the Sikh community as we call them here in the UK, because he recognised, even the right-wing extremists recognise the contribution that Sikhs have made to Western society, to Western democracies, and particularly here in the UK, how much they have done. So even the right-wing extremists have said, look, don't attack the Sikhs because they are us. They are aligned with our values. They contribute so much. And in fact, some of the Sikh Press Association did actually continue in some of their statements, and they sort of follow this same narrative, saying, look, why are you targeting us after everything that we've done? But we are targeted. We've become almost like universal victims of so much hate crime. And they say it's coming from all sorts of different types of bigotry, as they describe it. They're saying we're targets of white supremacy, we're targets of Hindutva, we're targets of Islamic extremism, etc., etc. So they're saying that basically everybody's having a go at us, but why us? And they continue to say that the Sikh Press Association has noted a visible rise in online hate from right across the board, publicly espousing white supremacist rhetoric, directly targeting Sikhs. It includes the rise of the bigoted influencer or the YouTuber, those who inflame, provoke and sensationalise for views. Yeah, again, we've covered many of those sorts of YouTubers who've had a pop at the Sikh community. And they've been dividing the communities in the process. And some of these people, they can have hundreds of thousands of followers, and especially in North America, even millions of followers who lap up this sort of propaganda, this hatred. And it does, of course, have a huge impact, especially if they've got hundreds of thousands of followers. And social media giants are rewarding their clickbait content through the way the algorithm works, and therefore it's got this perpetuating effect of spreading online anti-Sikh hate. So again, there are a lot of these forces are lined up against the Sikh community, and deeply unfairly, and all we can do, James, is to try and fight back and educate people, saying, look, please stop listening to this nonsense. The Sikh community is not a community that you should turn your hatred or your ire against, because they actually are deeply aligned with Western philosophy, Western values, Western democracy, Western rule of law, etc., etc. And as I have often argued, the Sikh Empire, the original Sikh Empire, was literally years, decades, centuries even ahead of its time in terms of its democratic credentials, its treatment of women, how women were treated equally, etc. They actually set the standard that the British then followed in terms of democracy and equality in society. So again, they were so ahead of the time. And yet, why do we in Western democracies turn our hatred against the Sikh community? There is no sense to it whatsoever. Anyway, James, let's move on to my second story. And actually, just as an addendum to that, in the United States, I don't have any pictures of this yet. Apparently, the Sikh Coalition reported overnight that Gurdwara in New York, the Gurdwara Baba Makan Shah Lubana in Richmond Hill, New York, was defaced with graffiti over the weekend. Apparently, it happens over a couple of days ago, or 2 or 3 days ago. Again, I've got no pictures, but again, there are reports that the Gurdwara in New York was attacked with graffiti as well. So hopefully we'll be able to bring pictures of that over coming days. So, okay, let me move on to another story, actually, James, that we have been covering together. This is the story of these commercial driver's license in America. And of course, there were two very tragic incidents involving illegal immigrants, Sikhs, unfortunately, in the United States. There was a terrible crash in Florida, which killed 3 people, where a trucker, again, it was a Sikh, it was an illegal immigrant Sikh who was driving a huge truck, tried to do a U-turn, an illegal U-turn on a freeway, and sadly a family piled into his truck on the freeway. 3 people were killed. Huge backlash right across the media. about why this guy was firstly doing the illegal manoeuvre, but secondly, why was he even in the United States in the first place? And then likewise, there was a similar incident in somewhere else, I forget where. California. There was another one. Another trucker caused another 3 people to die. Again, he turned out to be an illegal immigrant. So again, there's been, I suppose, to some degree, an understandable backlash against certainly illegal immigration from right across North America. But sadly, the backlash has, as is often the case, is over-egged the pudding, to use another English phrase. They've gone far too far in terms of the administration clampdown on the trucking industry, because basically they've used, again, I'll use another English idiom, they used a sledgehammer to crack a nut. In other words, they've overdone, they've over-regulated as a result to try and solve the problem. And of course, this, is having huge impact on the Sikh community, because of course we do know that there are something like 750,000 Sikhs, or certainly 500,000 Sikhs involved in the trucking industry. So there's a huge amount of people in the community who are directly involved in this community. And this regulatory backlash has clamped down on the community, particularly by revoking commercial driver's licenses for Sikhs, not just Sikhs, actually other minorities as well, but it does particularly affect the Sikh community. Those Sikhs whose visas expire before the end of their commercial driving licence expiry. So we've got this weird bureaucratic situation that you are a legal immigrant in the United States, you have your visa, you are legally allowed to live and work in the United States, and likewise you then get your CDL. But because of, again, some weird bureaucratic situation where your CDL happens to expire after your visa, their CDLs have been revoked. So, of course, there's been an understandable massive backlash against it, say, look, this makes no sense at all. We are legally allowed to live and work in the US. You cannot withdraw our CDLs. So, as a result, there is now a new class action that has been launched by the Sikh Coalition alongside several other partners in California to take action against the regulatory authorities, saying, no, you cannot do this. And because, of course, there are 2 levels to this. There is the state issue within California itself. But of course, there is the US Central Administration who are pushing this. And of course, this is, of course, coming from the Central Administration. And they have threatened many states like California, Pennsylvania, Minnesota, and New York specifically over this issue. They've said, look, so the central government has said, we will withhold money and funds to your state unless you impose these new regulations on drivers within your state. So these states have actually had no choice but to follow, because essentially their purse strings have been closed by central government. So anyway, as a result, there has been this class action that's been launched by the San Francisco-based Asian Law Caucus on behalf of Californian drivers. And the Sikh Coalition's legal director has actually stated in a public statement, these drivers have spent years anchoring their lives to these careers, only now to face potential economic ruin through no fault of their own. They deserve better. California must do better. Absolutely right. And again, it's we don't know yet. That it's just been launched, so we don't know what the outcome of this, but it will have a huge impact, of course, on many families, because, of course, many of these trucking companies are finding it almost impossible to recruit drivers now, because so many drivers are now turning away, either voluntarily or because they realise that they're going to lose their CDL, or they've had their CDL removed. And in terms of numbers, to give you a perspective on this, it was noted last month there were 17,000 truckers. Apparently now it's risen to 21,000 truckers have had their licenses revoked. Now you imagine 21,000 truck drivers removed from the pool of drivers, the impact that's going to have on the supply chain of the United States. It's not just impacting the lives and the livelihoods of trucking companies that can't recruit drivers. So trucking companies are actually now facing closure. Of course, the individuals themselves now can't work because they've lost their CDL, but it is the impact on the US supply chain. And again, we covered this when we covered this story before, is that suddenly there's going to, when ordinary Americans start seeing empty shelves, or they can't get hold of certain goods and produce that they normally take for granted that they can just walk into a shop and buy, and suddenly they're not there on the shelves, they're going to start asking questions. Why can't we buy X, Y, and Z. Why are our shelves half empty? Well, the reason is because they've used this sledgehammer to crack this nut, this silly problem that sadly has arisen. This over-egged pudding again, as I'll use that phrase again. They've completely overdone it, and likewise, this lawsuit is a direct result of this over-regulation. They've overdone it. They need to row it back. Put an ounce of common sense on this and say, look, come on, let's just be a bit more sensible about this. Yes, and don't forget the Sikh community is in full support of regulating the industry. The industry must be regulated. There are basic fundamental regulations that do need to be brought in, which are fully supported by the Sikh community, as indeed they should, because they do want, it's in their interest that the trucking industry is safe and is productive, is profitable, etc., but ultimately is safe for both the drivers and, of course, the general public. So they fully support it. But ultimately what they're saying is don't overdo it, because it is an act of self-harm. It is over-regulating it, and in fact, it's not just solving the problem, you're overdoing it, and you're actually causing the nation of the United States harm by doing this. So there you go, James. It is a story I have no doubt that will run and run.
Absolutely, and let's face it. I mean, I've used the term, the pendulum swinging, and when that pendulum on a clock swings, if it swings too far, either right or left, it's going to break the entire clock, and that's what it comes down to. There are simple solutions. If an individual has a work permit that expires on a certain date, very simple. You've got choices. A, tie the expiration date of the CDL to the same date that the work visa expires. Simple solution. The other solution is to create a new class of license, a CDL with a specific class that just basically states that you must have your work permit with you, that the license is valid as long as it is accompanied by a valid work permit, or just a combination of both. Have the CDL of a certain class with right on it the date of expiration of the license and of the work permit. Therefore, if the work permit is extended, so can the driver's license also be extended by just going into the DMV and getting an extension and a new card. So again, there are so many simple options that instead of choosing, they've gone so drastically far to just wipe out these careers for many people. And let's face it, the trucking industry is under immense pressure when it comes to increased expenses, whether that's the import of parts, whether that is the increased cost of fuel, whether that is increased cost of taxes and benefits to employees, which most don't because they get exploited that way. They are hired as independent drivers, not as company drivers, and therefore the companies are already trying to circumvent paying out these extra expenses. The reason they're doing this is because the margins on transportation have reduced so dramatically. There used to be a time in America and other nations where truck drivers were so well respected, but they were also very well compensated for the fact that they have to be away from home for so long when they are doing long haul, for the fact that their health is impacted, their life expectancy is reduced because of the job, the stress, and of course the loneliness that comes with it. So there's a lot of contributing factors why this new generation do not want to get into the trucking industry, and that's why we've seen such an important and an urgency to import drivers to handle the loads that are required to keep society rolling. That is, as that's reduced, again, we're going to see that to contribute to the inflationary rise of whether that's your toys for your children, whether it's the food in your fridge, or, anything else, your toilet paper, your napkins, whatever it is. It's going to contribute to increased prices. And we need to look at where we prioritize people who are giving of themselves. They're missing their children's birthdays, anniversaries, so many different things. but they are not respected for that, and they are not compensated accordingly because the margins have shrunk so far on the trucking industry that it is hard for companies to succeed and for individuals to make a secure and lasting financial income to support their families. So again, it is understandable why people don't want to get into the trucking industry, but this is just creating a barrier to trying to find solutions moving forward, Angus.
Indeed, well said. And as clearly people are going to find out, people don't realise just how important the trucking industry is to their everyday lives. They don't. Why would they? But they will notice when suddenly, as you say, they suddenly can't buy their avocados or their toys or whatever it is that they're going shopping for. So. Anyway, fingers crossed that the US administration does see a little bit of common sense on this subject, and of course we'll be there to report accordingly. But James, in the meantime, let's move on to our comments section. And I did a podcast at the end of last week with Dr. Greywell, and we did talk about essentially the theme of the podcast was why is December so important for the Sikh community? And of course, we often, from our side, Jens, we talk about Christmas, which is obviously important to the Christian community. But December is extraordinarily important for the Sikh community for very different reasons. And there's a whole series of anniversary dates throughout December. But particularly, it was the 10th Guru, Guru Gobind Singh Ji, who was involved, particularly around the latter part of December, where the Battle of Chamkaur, and his 4 sons were martyred. Two of his eldest sons were martyred in the Battle of Chamkaur, and his 2 youngest sons, and indeed his mother, were ultimately martyred shortly afterwards by the Mughals. It was deeply sad, I would say, a deeply moving sort of story. But again, it stood as a hugely powerful story to motivate many of the fundamental feelings of Sikhi, this feeling of resilience and selfless service, etc., which have come out of sort of great martyrdom stories like this. And these sahibzadas, as they're called, the 2 young sahibzadas and their mother who died. And sadly, again, the story was quite horrific. These 2 youngsters, they were about 9 and 6 years old, were captured after the Battle of Chamkaur along with their grandmother, the mother of Guru Gobind Singh Ji. And the 2 youngsters were bricked up behind a wall alive. And apparently the wall collapsed as they were doing it. So instead they just beheaded these young children. But these young children were offered a way out. They were offered, convert to Islam and we will fate you, we will reward you, you will live long lives and you will live wealthy lives if you convert to Islam. These 2 young boys said, no, absolutely not. We are Sikhs and we will remain Sikhs to the day we died. So they beheaded these young boys. So of course it is standard as a huge example, even today in the 21st century, about the strength of faith and the significance of faith, particularly the Sikh faith. And that is of course what's upset so many enemies of the Sikh faith, particularly Hindutva, because they just cannot get their heads around the power behind the Sikh faith. And of course the theme of the podcast, to come full circle back to what I was talking about, the theme of the podcast is how Hindutva have tried to hijack this whole story. This whole story essentially is about 2 young Sikhs who refuse to convert, and the story, effectively, the message is how powerful the Sikh faith is and can be. But Hindutva, who now publicly celebrate the same event, they've hijacked it and reframed it to say, oh, it's the power of youth. It's youngsters. It's saying the strength of youngsters. But the Sikh community is saying, no, it's nothing to do with the power of youngsters. It is the power of the Sikh faith. There's a difference there, a very powerful, subtle nuance that is very different. So anyway, so the podcast was that just give our audience, if you haven't watched it, that is what it was all about. Now, TC, thank you, TC, for your comments on this. As you actually say, it was a very powerful story. And as you say, once again, the aim is to control the narrative and force compliance with Hindutva ideology. This is viscerally abhorrent, as the podcast explains why. Yes, indeed. So again, as you picked up the whole nuance there, TC, it was ultimately, it was how Hindutva tried to, again, like in many other ways, to try and appropriate many things that are fundamental to Sikhi, to try and undermine it and destroy it. Again, it's part of this multilateral attack on Sikhism across the world, James.
Absolutely. And this is a story that we've covered in the past on different levels. mostly throughout the month of December last year and previous to that. And of course, it is one of, some would see it as sad, some people would see it as infuriating, but at the same time, it's also one of inspiration because even the young understand the importance of being true to themselves in this instance. And they were true to themselves, to their religion, and they unfortunately paid the ultimate price for it. But it shows the power of sticking to your personal beliefs and what you believe ethically right, no matter how old you are.
Indeed, and as Hardal Singh says, history is not forgotten by the Sikhs for sure. And indeed, certainly the outpouring and certainly the comments, columns, and across social media about these events of that time of the 10th Guru, clearly it really has a huge impact even today and a huge resonance with the Sikh community even today. So, Bobby Singh.
Yeah.
Does say the Khalistan campaign should try to convince Western leaders that breaking up India will be hugely in favour of the West. Absolutely, as we say on a regular basis. And as Bobby highlights, firstly, it will weaken Russia, as indeed, as we do know, for example, India is still buying Russian oil and feeding the finances of the Russian treasury to finance the Ukraine war. So by breaking up India, India is a huge ally of Russia. So again, Russia will lose a very powerful ally. Secondly, most of the former Indian countries, the various parts that will break apart, will be partners with the West, especially Khalistan. Again, we do say that once you break India up into its constituent parts, its more natural constituent parts, each of those parts will likely be Western allies, and certainly Khalistan definitely will be. And finally, Khalistan can handle China very well. Indeed, because Khalistan, the proposed boundary of Khalistan will actually butt up against China. It will form a very important strategic location to I won't say take on China. It's not about confronting China. It is about essentially just being there to be amicable, have amicable relations with China, but certainly in a firm and robust relationship with China is what I would describe it as. So, James, as we often say, I think most of these issues, we talk about regularly. We totally support that. There are very few negative arguments to say why Khalistan shouldn't be established.
Absolutely. And let's not forget that we've also talked about an India Union where when the balkanization does take place and Khalistan is a sovereign nation, that they can work with other sovereign nations that also come after it, including J&K or others. And they can help to keep the balance of power from China and Russia and other individuals, not only within the Asian region, but worldwide as well. So I think that the benefits of Khalistan are so essential to the future of the world. I think that there is a lot to be said for it. And again, thank you to Bobby Singh for his comments there as well.
Indeed. And Sat Bachchan saying this is again in response to the podcast I did with Layla. And I mentioned it was sadly the dollar tends to trump human rights in many of these cases, as we often highlight.
That's right.
Sat Bachchan Singh says money is more respected amongst the low moral degraded human beings who are lower than animal levels. I think you're probably right there. Sadly, the humanity seems to be driven by the dollar. And then, as you say, as animals after eating, they don't kill or store any food for the next day. Well, actually, the one that springs to mind there is the squirrel, actually, which does actually save food for the next day. So maybe that second part of your point isn't totally valid. But certainly, yes, I think what is clear is, as we say, James, money always seems, sadly, with our leaders to trump human rights.
Well, and if we took on a campaign to provide refrigerators to bears, maybe they would store some meat for the middle of winter snack. It's true, though. It's that the money is trumping all else. No pun intended there. But it is causing an issue that people are not forward thinking. They are looking at the immediate gratification, the immediate satisfaction, and whether that is as political or individual. That is a huge lesson to be learned. That money needs to be. It really needs to be taken back in terms of the prevalence that it lays on today's society.
Indeed, and here's some Punjabi to highlight to highlight our ignorance of the Punjabi language. I had, of course, sadly to resort to Google Translate because my Punjabi is still struggling. But anyway, Maninder Chandy says, "Long live Khalistan." Now these three comments actually about again going back to some of the history of those times, the history pre-empire times, particularly when the Mughals were running rampant around that sort of region, and the Hindus, of course, the Hindu forces were quite often in alliance with the Mughals to attack the Sikhs. So, of course, Maninder and Be Brave and indeed Jagtar Sidhu highlight some of the issues that happened then. Long live Khalistan. The Hill Kings attacked Guruji 12 times. Ungrateful people, shameful. And Be Brave says Sant Jarnail Singh Sahibji Bhindranwale was, is and will remain long. And then Jagtar Sidhu says, reminds us, the Brahmin kings, essentially the Hindus, the Brahmin kings attacked Sri Guru Gobind Singh Ji 12 times, and the Mughals only 2 times. So again, it's reminding us the fact that back in those days, and again, this is not mentioned here, is that yes, there was this ongoing sort of tension and fractious wars between the Mughals and of course the Hindus and the Sikh militia at the time, the Missals. And it was actually, ironically, the Hindus tended to ally with the Mughals against the Sikhs. But suddenly, when the Mughals turned on the Hindus, where did the Hindus turn for help? They turned to the Sikhs, saying, "Can you please help us fight the Mughals?" Of course. So again, the hypocrisy amongst the Brahmins at the time is runs deep. So as many of these commenters here, right, going back to history, and likewise, I think as Jagtar says, we don't forget. I mean, we don't just not forget June and November 1984, Operation Blue Star, and the Sikh genocide, but we're not forgetting the 12 times when the Sikhs were attacked by the Mughals and the Brahmin kings, of course. So there you go, James, a bit of a history lesson for us.
There we go. We continue to learn, and that's what it's all about, Angus.
Indeed. And the final set of comments, this is more reflective of how deeply spiritual that podcast I did with Dr. Grewal. And again, Dr. Grewal did get very emotional talking about the events of Guru Gobind Singh Ji and the Battle of Chamkaur and the Sahibzadas and the martyrs. And it did actually, a lot of comments we had after that particular podcast were, I'd say, more spiritual in rather than political, although there is, of course, an inherent link within Sikhi between spirituality and politics. But ultimately, there was a definite move towards the sort of more spiritual side on this. We had a lot of comments that just basically said Waheguru Ji, Sat Sri Akal, Waheguru Ji, and Waheguru Ji from it was Tajinder Singh, Singh C8. 2N and Suk Jinder Singh, etc. But again, rather than finish on the Khalistan Zindabad, really for this one, James, I thought it was more appropriate, particularly after that podcast, and particularly at the end of December, this time of huge importance to the Sikh community, to end with the Waheguru Ji. I think that is probably more appropriate on this occasion.
I do believe you're correct there, Angus. And there's been amazing comments. And even the last 24 hours, I've seen some of the comments on there, the people wishing me well. So again, thank you to everybody for the amazing comments over the last year and a half. And don't worry, I will come back as a guest on the show every once in a while.
We certainly hope so, James. And that is it for the day. That is it for the year, even. That is it for 2025. And sadly, that is it, at least for now, for James and James involved in Perspectives. So a huge thank you to James for all your contributions. And certainly we hope to see James back again on Perspectives or podcasts or whatever it happens to be. And I'm sure our audience join me in thanking you for all your contributions and hope to see you again back on our screens. But there we must bring...
It's always been a pleasure working with you, Angus.
Likewise, indeed. I will miss you deeply, but the show will go on without you, but there will always be a place for you when hopefully we'll get you back on the show as well, as I'm sure our audience will welcome you back. But there we must draw things to a close now for 2025. Thanks so much to our wonderful audience. Thank you for all your contributions. Thank you for your loyalty. It's been very much appreciated. Like we always say, we couldn't do this show without you, so do please keep watching us. Do keep your support coming in. Keep your comments coming in. Don't forget you can still message message us. In fact, you can still message James if necessary. You can certainly message me and the show at message@satellodgetv.com if there's anything you'd like to bring to our attention. As I say, do keep your thoughts in the comments. Do let us know stories you'd like us to cover. But all the very best for the coming year. We wish all of you, all our audience, a very happy new year for 2026. We hope it brings you health, happiness, spirituality, Chardi colour, and of course, khalistan. That is what, of course, we're all here aiming for. But in the meantime, thanks so much for watching. It is a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
And hopefully we will see you next time in 2026.